Hello and welcome to the 12th episode of Guido Talks. Don't forget that if you don't want to look at us and our lovely new haircuts, then you can always listen wherever you normally get your podcasts from. Check out all of the different links on the Guido Talks website. My name's Tom Harwood and I'm joined again today by Guido Talks founder and editor Paul Staines, as well as reporter Christian Cowgie. And this is Guido Talks, the show where we go through our favourite stories of the last 7 days and chat about a bit more about them in depth. So without further ado, let's get stuck straight in. One of our most read stories this week didn't actually pop up all over the media elsewhere, but it was very interesting because it focused on 4 members of parliament who were found to have broken the rules during the election. Cowgie, can you tell us a little bit about the first story that kicked us off, the first MP, or I should say former MP, that we found out had been fined?
Yes, well, this one came first because we were actually leaked the contents of the Commissioner's findings before the other MPs were made public. But this relates to Laura Pidcock, the former cheerleader of Corbynism, who spectacularly managed to lose a rock-solid Labour seat in northwest Durham at the election. She was fined nearly £4,000 for misusing MPs' resources, MPs' stationery, in trying to sway the results of the election, and even £4,000 worth of cheating at the taxpayers' expense couldn't save her seat to Mr. Richard Holden. But there were also 3 other MPs, Tom.
There were indeed, and the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards released the reports on these 4 in total, 3 more on top of Pidcock MPs who were actually fined for their misuse of stationery, of second-class stamps and of official letterhead paper where they put out basically election literature under the guise of normal communication with constituents. And the other 3 MPs were Zach Goldsmith, George Freeman, and the Labour MP Daniel Zeichner. And the Daniel Zeichner one particularly interests me because I received one of his letters, one of his election letters. I haven't lived in the constituency of Cambridge since before 2015, but still he somehow had my name on file and sent along one of these letters that basically just read about how much he was opposed to Brexit. I'm not sure it was that well targeted and didn't really do him any favours, not least because I wasn't voting there. But if I was, I'm not sure I would have been more inclined to vote for him. But no, there were hundreds of letters sent out by him, hundreds of letters sent out also by George Freeman and Zach Goldsmith and Laura Pidcock. So in this initial wave of investigation, there
were 13,000 sent out by Zach Goldsmith, who had a whopping £9,000 fine from the Commissioner's office. I'm sure he won't struggle to pay it, but that's a hell of an amount to be whacked with.
It has to be said, this dodge has been going on for, I was going to say years, but probably decades, and now it's kind of industrialised. They'll find an excuse, which will be a survey. Your MP is interested in your views, and they'll do this throughout the course of the Parliament. They're interested in your views on anything, and they have software to do this. So on the crossing outside the school in the constituency. And once they do that, they then have an excuse to email you. And the clever ones will always relate to something local, but the unsophisticated ones will misuse it near an election and get caught, particularly if they say something partisan rather than something that's more constituency based. It's a way of them stretching the budget at the taxpayer's expense and getting underneath the budget for election, the limitations of the election budget.
Absolutely.
I think they're getting more active on catching it because I can't remember, and there's a few more coming down the line, I think you said. I can't remember when the Parliamentary Commission has been this rigorous.
Mm. I mean, it is very, very normal practice to do this during a parliamentary term. You'll see lots more letters are sent than need to. One of the very usual things that I think just about every MP does now is send a letter, a birthday letter of congratulations that you've turned 18 to every constituent that turns 18. Now, of course, that's getting the name out there, and people will think, oh, what a thoughtful MP sending a birthday card to any constituent. But of course, that's the sort of thing that goes on all the time during the course of a parliament. What is particularly wrong in this case is it was during the purdah period, during the long campaign and the short campaign, where these letters were sent, and that is what has caught them out and meant that they've had to pay these fines. But moving on from that story to the big dominant story this week of the mini budget. I think it was officially called the Summer Economic Statement or something to that effect, whereby Rishi Sunak unveiled another, I think, £30 billion package of rescue measures for the economy. But Paul, can you talk us through a little bit of the most important measures that went on there?
Was it you, Tom, or Christian, who calculated that was 1.2 billion a minute that he gave away?
Yeah.
So, a billion here, a billion there. You're soon talking about real big money, aren't you? The key things that came out of it were the eat out to help out, which sounds like a lesbian porno offer, but is actually a scheme where you're going to get your restaurant meal paid for 50% up to £10 per head. And there are questions about whether you could go from one restaurant to another for courses. So you could spend £60 and get the taxpayers to stump up for £30 of it. I think that's going to be quite an effort, but I can see if you're on a budget, you might as well take advantage of it. The other things that came out were we had more news about the tapering of the furlough scheme, which is obviously going to be necessary. And we also heard about new payment plans for if you're going to hire someone under 25. So if I'm looking to hire a replacement for any of you two, I could get it paid for by the government up to minimum wage, which sounds like an excellent idea. So watch your spots. There are other offers, all designed really to try and wean people off the rather generous packages we've got already, and signalling that there is trouble ahead on the employment front.
Yeah, and it seemed like this was relatively well received by particularly sort of the right-wing think tank world in Westminster. One of the biggest measures that had the most support from the policy wonk side of things was the raising of the threshold for that stamp duty up to £500,000, whereby people would pay no stamp duty. And one former SPAD told me that one of the reasons why people are so excited about this is because although it's advertised as being temporary, the last time that stamp duty was raised, I think to £150,000 in 2008, they said that would be a 1-year temporary thing, and it never went away. It's one of those taxes that it's very hard to reimpose once you've taken it away. And so by quite a few people's estimations, this may well be a permanent change, which will really help to lubricate the housing market and get people buying and selling again.
I have never seen a tax cut that I haven't liked, although I did notice that, we go on about the red wall. How many houses in those red wall constituencies actually are going at £500,000 and would have any stamp duty on them anyway at this juncture? Look, I think it's a great thing. I think stamp duty is a pernicious tax. But I wondered about the targeting of it.
Well, yeah, I think because it's the ceiling, right? I mean, any house that is over the previous ceiling will feel the benefit of this. Even if it's a £200,000 house, there will be now no stamp duty, whereas there would have been a bit before. So it does help even the lower levels, which is something that Caroline Lucas did not understand. Where I think she sent out a tweet saying, "Where's the help for the £300,000 houses?" Forgetting that if a ceiling is raised to £500,000, that also includes every pound and penny below that.
There is this tipsy-topsy thing that's happened now, which is that we have a Conservative Chancellor who is, sort of spraying money at whole sectors, and Labour are now coming out, and their main line of attack after the mini budget has been, no, it needs to be more focused. So whether it's the £1,000 for returning a furloughed worker, and there are concerns about a lot of that money is going to go to companies that always had plans to return furloughed workers. And the same, I think one of the stories this morning that the Labour press office put out was that a lot of this stamp duty thing could go to people with second holiday homes. This sort of topsy-turvy world we now live in, where Labour are concerned about jobs and targeting public spending, conceivably more than a Conservative Chancellor.
I, for one, welcome Labour's new fiscal hawkishness. I'm a little bit sceptical that they're just doing opposition for opposition's sake. I do think that there is a question about whether that £1,000 bounty for keeping people on is actually going to make any difference. And it's just a giveaway to, if you're going to get rid of someone, you're going to get rid of them. And if you're going to keep them, you're going to keep them. So I don't understand how £1,000 changes that dynamic. And it just seems a free giveaway to people, that £1,000.
I think a lot of it is because this is only running, it's if you keep someone through to January. So I think the Treasury is sort of making a bit of a gamble here, trying to hope that by the time we get into the new year, most of the economy has opened back up again, and people are getting back to normal and spending back at normal levels. And so trying to just give that little nudge, that incentive for firms to sort of weather the storm for a further few more months until people are up back and spending at relatively normal levels. That's the sort of gamble that they've taken. But of course, it could be the case that we get to January, we've had a second wave over winter, everything got locked down again, and we're in deeper problems for the country. And then in that case, the £1,000 giveaway to these companies would do absolutely nothing at all.
And there's a similar question over whether the whole Eat Out to Help Out scheme, that was the big headline leader. But according to polling, the reason people aren't going to restaurants is not because they're worried they can't afford it. It's because they're worried about the safety aspect. And there could be an argument to be made that if Rishi at his Wagamama's photo shoot after the mini budget had been seen wearing a face mask, and there was a bigger push at government to wear face masks and encourage public safety, that would do more to get restaurants and bars back up and running again than a 50% off meal voucher.
Yeah, that did seem an uncharacteristic slip up by them. He should have had the mask on. But then I suspect he could have been seen to be chatting to the people he was serving. Did I see something that he has actually done waitering before?
He has.
He was younger.
I think when he was at university, he had a summer job.
No, it's actually to pay for some of his fees at Winchester. Back when his parents were quite lower middle class and couldn't struggling to afford the fees.
I'm not sure it's the most lower middle class thing to go to Winchester College, and maybe that's why he hasn't whipped out the anecdote so much, because it
always
reminds
forget
everyone
that you went to minor public schools.
He missed out on a scholarship. It was a life of hardship and graft, and he's done very well.
It's not quite the son of a bus driver backstory that Sajid Javid had. That's putting it mildly. But one of the things about Rishi Sunak as a politician is he's almost unique in the cabinet, I think, in being praised by people on the left, not so much for his political worldview, more for what he looks like. And the phrase "dishy Rishi" has been doing the rounds in just about every paper, and surprisingly amongst the sort of Trotsap, Corbyn-adjacent outriders within that Labour sphere of commentary. And you had everyone from the Navarra media types and Owen Jones saying that Rishi Sunak is an attractive politician. And you have this kind of objectifying of the Chancellor that I don't think would carry much, would not really wash if it was with a female politician at all.
Well, let's not forget Adam Bolton also asking whether his package was big enough.
Steady. I think he's just slim and under 40, isn't he? So most politicians aren't slim and 40. I mean, he's not my type, but is he particularly good looking? I don't. It's. I'm not gonna besmirch
He's
his
also
handsome
got
features.
he does have an air of confidence about him. I mean, he uploaded a photo of him wearing a hoodie working from home, and I can't say I've seen a politician wear a hoodie with such a level of coolness about them that as Rishi, but
But he did also upload a photo when the pubs reopened, saying it's great that the pubs have reopened, standing in front of what looked like a kettle shop. So he does seem to be a bit gung ho about the photo opportunities.
Listen, I'm not saying he's Ed Miliband, but he's not. He's not. He's not. He's not. He's not a rock
think of an
star
attractive
either.
politician.
It's just. I think there's something a bit nerdy about him as well.
I'd be very worried actually if I were Rishi that I was going to peak too soon, because I think the brighter stars have a tendency of burning out. We're at least 5 years away, probably a lot more, from a leadership election, and he's got years of hard economic decisions ahead of him, and his star power is going to fall pretty quickly at some point.
Yeah, I mean,
he's not quite. Is he polling? Not quite reached Gordon Brown's highest level of polling positive rating.
Or Nick Clegg's.
or Nick Clegg's. That's a very good point, Christian. He's going to be in tough times, I suspect, next year, and then I doubt he'll be so popular.
There was an interesting poll from YouGov this week that sort of showed where the previously most popular politicians in the country are now. So Rishi is currently the most popular politician in the country, but at one point so was Theresa May, so was Nick Clegg, so was Gordon Brown, and so was Tony Blair, and so was William Hague. I saw was one of the peculiar ones. I didn't realise that at one point he was the most popular politician in the country, but all of these people were, and they have significantly slipped down since. But I think probably it's time to move on from discussing Rishi and his package and moving towards the Labour Party's response, which seems to have been incredibly muddled this week, starting with their proposals, or were they not proposals, for a wealth tax on homes and savings. Christian, can you talk us through this?
Yes, so on the Sunday shows, we have the Shadow Chancellor, Annalise Dodds, who was on Andrew Marr, and she was asked 4 times whether Labour supported a wealth tax, and she ummed and ahed and basically tried avoiding the question. And then the next day, I think it was, Keir Starmer went on LBC and was asked the same question, and he more unequivocally said, yes, we would back a wealth tax. And then the night before the mini budget, we had Labour come out saying they were now supporting no taxes, no tax rises as a response to coronavirus. They want to grow the economy rather than tax it, which is, again, things have completely flipped around for Labour there. So that was a pretty impressive, 3-day wealth tax from umming and ahhing to say we're going to support one, saying we're not going to support one. And I think people may have been left pretty confused by that.
But then, of course, on Wednesday night, you had the party flip-flop again when another minister in the Shadow Treasury, or Shadow Minister, I should say, came out and said, in response to a story in the Times, that they had ditched plans for a wealth tax, saying, no, we are supporting the efforts to research a wealth tax, and pointed to research efforts from, I think, the LSE and Warwick University that are saying that a wealth tax would be really great and whatever. And so it seems that the wealth tax is back on as Labour Party.
I think that gives the game away that they are serious about it, because Dan Carden, who was the Shadow Minister, he's the Shadow Financial Secretary. It would be his kind of job in a government to do the details on this. So they clearly are trying to figure out how to do it. Shocker, I would not be totally surprised to see the Tories do something similar. They won't go after pensions, and they probably won't go after mansions or houses, but they will look to find some kind of asset tax if they can, because Otherwise, we're going to have a massively ballooning deficit. And they have promised not to put up NI, income tax, or something else. What was the other third one they wouldn't put up?
They
VAT.
promised VAT?
VAT.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
So if you can't do any of those,
But this
what are you going
isn't
to
a
do?
normal. This isn't a normal recession. We keep forgetting. This is a recession that was brought about because the government literally told people to stop trading and to close down their businesses. And so, in many ways, when we might well, if we have a V-shaped recovery, we might well not have a deficit after this. We'll have a lot of debt, but it will be sort of all in the past. We won't if we get back up to the level the economy was
Tom,
before pretty quickly.
I'll bet you quite a lot of money we will have a deficit.
Oh no, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that we might not have the same. We might not have a deficit that touches 10% of GDP as we did back in 2010. It might well be something slightly different. Yes, there'll be some scarring, but depending on how sharp the V is, it's not going to behave like a normal recession. So there might not be the same economic response to the recession that you might expect.
11 years after the global financial crisis, they still had a recession that they promised to get rid of in 2015, 2020. I don't think they're serious about it.
Well, no, the deficit fit within the fiscal rules right from 2018. I think it was that it got down below that target that is sort of manageable and that even a fiscal hawk like Sajid Javid would support. But
it's because he was shadow chancellor, and he was the chancellor, sorry, not the shadow, and he was bullshitting.
Well, no, but now he's. I mean, there was that big fight before the election about the manifesto that Sajid Javid actually won, and there's some speculation that it's the reason why he was kicked out as chancellor, because he was really adamant that those fiscal rules were included in the Tory manifesto, and he won that battle, and the fiscal rules are there. So there's only a limited amount of budget deficit in normal times that can be acceptable. Obviously, we're in extraordinary times now, but we're getting back to normal times.
Yeah, but you've got.
Can you just clarify something, Tom, for the readers and the viewers and the listeners? Have you actually applied for that job of doing the Downing Street live briefing?
Absolutely not. No.
It's just, I've got this offer on that I can hire someone 25 and under and get the government half pay for it. Probably not a bad time to do the move.
Oh, I hate to break this to you, Paul, but whoever gets the job, the government's going to pay for all of it, or rather, I should say, the taxpayers.
Okay.
No, but I mean, moving on from Treasury tax policy, there was an announcement with regard to BBC tax policy this week. Paul, can you take us through what happened officially?
Yes, so they are Osborne quite cunningly, when they were renegotiating the charter and the budget for the BBC a few years ago, stuck the BBC. Well, you say you stuck them with the bill for the over 75s. There is no bill. They choose the bill, people. So said that the government wasn't going to subsidise the over 75s, another bit of generosity from Gordon Brown, on the licence fee, the telly tax. And the BBC said, great, fine, took the inflation plus boost to their budget, and has moaned ever since about the millions that they aren't getting from old age pensioners. And if you're 75 and you've been paying the telly tax since you were at college, you have paid £7,500. I think that's more than enough for it. Anyway, so the BBC has said they're going to reinstigate collecting the money. We asked the press office, are they going to prosecute over 75s? They gave an evasive answer. They never said yes. I suspect if you are over 75, don't worry about it. They are not going to have headlines where Granny goes to jail for not paying the TV license fee. And the more people that do it, the bigger the civil disputes, the more difficult it will be for them to collect. And we did another piece, which is something I've banged on about for years. Netflix didn't exist when, in the form it is now, when the iPlayer was pretty much ahead of its time, and technology-wise, which is easy to do when you've got a river, a tsunami of teletax funding, coming towards you, which you can spend on R&D. And they had the chance to use their back catalog to launch live streaming all over the world. They didn't. They had some abortive deal with ITV, which was ruled to be anti-competitive, quite rightly. And Netflix now has revenues of $20 billion, 17 billion pounds. And the BBC has revenues of 5 billion. If the BBC hadn't been so addicted to the license fee, they could have now become the global media Goliath that Netflix is, and not be dependent on extorting Granny and threatening her with jail for their funding.
Yeah, it does seem that they might not have entirely missed the moment. If BBC figures didn't get so defensive over this idea that uniquely they're a service that has to be funded by a tax backed up by the threat of prison if people don't pay it, if they opened themselves up to genuine competition and did innovative stuff like that, like becoming that global streaming service that they could have been and could still be potentially, then there's no doubt in my mind that they would have less financial troubles, because they'd open up themselves not just from a market of potentially 65 million taxpayers in the UK, but of 9 billion potential customers across the whole world. It just seems bizarre that they don't pursue a more market-orientated strategy. And then we wouldn't really care if Gary Lineker was being paid £1.5 million a year or whatever it is, because it wouldn't be coming out of our taxes.
It's not too late. I mean, people forget Amazon Prime Video, which is billions in revenue as well, only launched in 2016. Disney only launched this year, didn't it? Their streaming offer.
Yeah.
It is not too late to get in the game. The consumers globally are attuned to it, expect to pay for their live streaming, and live streaming, if it's priced right, isn't worth pirating. You get a much better quality if you actually pay the bill. The British public constitutes 1% of the world's population. There is 99% of the world out there for the BBC, half of which understand English. So it's a big marketplace. Get out there, BBC. Think about your stock options if you're a private sector company. You'll be rich beyond your wildest dreams. Stop threatening Granny with jail.
Yeah, I think we're all in broad agreement for that. So for a policy position, that's quite good. Getting the ideological array of Guido Fawkes on board. Congratulations. But no, let's move on for a moment from the media back to politics, because of course there is a leadership election rolling on at the moment. You might not notice it just by looking at things that are important, but no, the Liberal Democrats are actually in the middle of a contest to elect a new leader. And Kelgi, you've been looking through some of the candidates' declarations of funding. What's been going on there?
Yes, I mean, everyone is enthralled 24 hours with the ongoing Liberal Democrat leadership election, and the money is rolling in. Literally thousands of pounds are being spent. And yes, you're right, I've been looking through the candidates' declared spending according to Parliament, and last week Layla Moran was ahead, primarily bankrolled, quite bizarrely, by European royalty, or some might say fake royalty. I'm not a history buff, but that's quite bizarre. But then Sir Ed Davey massively overtook, is now out-earned by 3 times what Layla Moran has. And we discovered that a lot of that, over the last £16,000, has come from Chris and Tina Lee, who own one of the world's largest jet rental air charter companies. This is a man who's running very much on a green platform. And we also discovered that £5,000 of it has come from the new British head of Huawei. So it's quite an interesting, some might say, dodgy list of recipients. And if I were a Lib Dem member, I'd be a bit worried about what these sources of income indicate for party policy under Ed Davey.
Interesting
I have to
stuff.
say,
Well,
I think from the point of view of stories and which would be best for trade for us, I think Lena Moran's got to be the one. But is Ed really going to win? I mean, the bookies have a slight favourite. He says he's going to get 60% of the vote. We tweeted that last night by mistake, I think. 60% of the nominations, which is hardly surprising given. Is this his second or third time? I can't remember running for leader. So he should have all the contact data in his database already.
yeah, well, we'll keep an eagle eye over that race. But there was something else that happened this week that I was quite pleased by, of course, which it seemed that during PMQs, so going all the way back to even before the fiscal statement, which seems like a world away, but Boris had a new taunt for Sir Keir Starmer. He called him Captain Hindsight, which is something that this website has been calling Sir Keir for the last month or so, with regard to his constant proclamations on what should have been done about coronavirus, whether we should have locked down earlier, or we should have done this, we should have done that. He has all of these suggestions now that, curiously, he never brought up at the time. So that South Park reference is what we have been using for Keir Starmer, and Boris Johnson brought it up in PMQs today, showing that he might well be still a reader of the blog.
No comment.
I think certainly my favourite story of the week, possibly the funniest story of the week, was a massive election upset, which Britain has got used to now. But this was the victory of former SPAD Tufton Street familiar James Price winning the Oxford Union presidential election. A great guy who only really entered the race as something to keep him occupied during lockdown, and actually was only really able to win it because of coronavirus. The Oxford Union removed I think it's a 25-mile radius limit on people being able to vote. And he stormed the election. And for the first time in the union's 197-year history, I think it is, we now have a former student who is going to be taking helm. A very sound guy. Obviously, there's been a lot of calls for social change at Oxford. We've seen the Roads Must Fall people. We were talking with James, and he's maybe indicated that he will be in favour of one statue coming down at Oxford Union, that of Michael Heseltine's, which has pride of place in the debating chamber. So we'll watch his tenureship of the Oxford Union with an eagle eye.
No, it's very good to see someone who's going to definitely stand as a bastion of free speech and open debate. That's something that is important. And of course, the Oxford Union is an internationally renowned institution. So massive, massive congratulations to James. Thoroughly well deserved. But that is just about all that we have time for this week. We have rattled through this. So thank you so much for sticking with us as we discussed those stories. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.
Bye.